Hey there. So John Green just made a video where he compared the social internet to cigarettes. And this is nothing new. Internet people have been criticizing the internet for as long as the internet has existed. But unsurprisingly, John Green's specific point is amazingly poignant. To paraphrase, he talks about this contradiction between the fact that the internet is what provides community to those who need community the most and who wouldn't have gotten it otherwise, and the fact that the internet is what destroys societies and makes community impossible. And so far, no one has really been able to satisfyingly resolve this contradiction. But what I find interesting is that John Green, as a 40-something-year-old man, has known a world without the internet and a world with it. And of course, he thrives on the internet. That's what created his life and his livelihood in Nerdfighteria, etc. But he has experienced a world without it. Whereas someone like me, a 21-year-old Gen Zer, I've never known a world without the internet. And so my life, like the lives of most young people I know, is defined by alternating between fueling my addiction to the social internet and doing things to try to cure myself of the internet. Like, spending time in nature, reading physical books, practicing meditation. But most recently, my primary balm has been the hit Disney TV show Phineas and Ferb.
There's 104 days.
And I want to explain why. I want to explain why, for me, a creature of the social internet, Phineas and Ferb has been so refreshing. And in many ways, Phineas and Ferb provides a lot of the same thing that the social internet provides. Bite-sized content to enjoy in between living my daily life. But in other ways, it's pretty fundamentally different. And I see three main differences between an animated kid show like Phineas and Ferb and the social internet. And the first has to do with creative vision. The social internet wasn't made by anyone. Like, there are people that we can point to as sort of founding fathers of the internet, like John Green, for instance. But in the end, the social internet as it exists today is what happens when 1 billion people shout into the voids. You can focus on the individual, but eventually the void will drown you out. And that makes it hard for there to be kind of a point to the internet. That makes it hard to follow what is going on. And we'll get to this later. But the central thing is Phineas and Ferb, unlike the social internet, is the creative vision of Dan and Swampy, of two really interesting creative people trying to make a point. And so you can dive into that entire world and see that entire creative vision for what it is without being drowned out by anything else. And that's just really refreshing. The second point is that, in my opinion, the internet can't tell a narrative. And this seems really confusing because you have all of these pundits talking about controlling the narrative. That is the phrase that is used. The left is trying to control the narrative. The right is trying to control the narrative. The propagandists are trying to control the narrative. But I think there's a difference here, and that was pointed out by the South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han in his book, The Crisis of Narration, which I haven't read, but I know kind of what it's about. And he says that there's a difference between narrative and information. What the internet provides us with is a flood of information. You go to TikTok and you see 1 million different 15-second videos giving you information. You look at Twitter or Blue Sky or Tumblr or Instagram or YouTube, and it's the same thing. A lot of information, but no narrative, which is frustrating because society as we know it was built on narrative. It was built on cavemen or whatever sitting around a campfire telling stories. Stories that had a beginning and a middle and an end, which the internet doesn't ever give us. It's just information, and a sequence of information may look like a narrative, right? But there is no beginning, middle, and end. Whereas, as I'm diving into the world of Phineas and Ferb, what I'm presented with is episodes that contain 2 parts. And each of those parts is a little story of its own that follows a reliable pattern that Phineas and Ferb fans will know. And then if you take a broader view, you can see kind of bigger narratives emerging from this sequence of stories. The story of Phinabella, the story of Jeremy and Candace, the story of Ferb and Doofenshmirtz, all of these little things the story of, Vanessa trying to make amends with her father. And it's just really satisfying, again, to dive in this world and not be drowned out by voices, but to have something that you can follow, something that you can grab onto. And this is also true of, any kind of kids show or franchise or fandom or whatever. And it's not like I didn't know this before. I'm someone that grew up consuming art. But it's really satisfying to be reminded that this kind of thing is possible, that narratives are impossible and they are so important and they are such a balm for the soul. But then there's a third thing that is kind of unique to Phineas and Ferb. There's a lot of things that make Phineas and Ferb unique, like the consistently brilliant writing, the humor, the visual gags, the engaging and unique characters, the facts that they repeat the same jokes over and over and over again, and it somehow never gets old.
A platypus? Parry the platypus!
These things are unique, they're special, but what's so captivating to me is the fact that Phineas and Ferb is a world full of drama and intrigue and character development and emotions and relationships, but that also somehow seems to center love and optimism and friendship. The fact that these two things are possible at the same time is something that you won't really find on the social internet, which is a place where r/doomer is one of the most popular subreddits, and where you get sucked into this attitude where pessimism is sophisticated and optimism is a distraction. Maybe I should make a whole nother video about this. But you get led to believe that if you are a truly engaged, truly knowledgeable, truly wise observer of the world, you will be a doomeristic pessimist. And if you are an optimist, then you are buying the propaganda, you're not looking hard enough, you're not thinking hard enough. And Phineas and Ferb reminds us that that is not at all true. There's a lot of, fantastical, unbelievable things about Phineas and Ferb, but that is one point that I think we should take seriously. And why should that attitude be limited to kid shows? Why should we say, when you're a child, you can be a, happy, creative optimist, but then when you become an adult, you have to switch around and become a sad, grumpy pessimist? Why can you not have a world full of drama and intrigue and emotions and relationships and real things, real valuable things, that is also a fundamentally optimistic world? And so that is why whenever I need to run away from the social internet, I turn to Phineas and Ferb. And your equivalent of, a balm for the internet may be something different. But I think it's really interesting to analyze what makes these things different from the social internet and what makes these things feel to us like a cure for the social internet. Because even 30 years into the internet's existence, the internet is still an experiment. We are recently finding out long-term what the social internet means for society, but we haven't reached the end game yet. Is the internet a bad thing? That's the question that John Green tried to ask in his video, and he never really came to a conclusion. And I don't have one either. I can't tell you whether or not the internet is a bad thing. The least we can do is pay attention. Pay attention to what the internet is doing to us, and then what things that are not internet do to us, and the difference between how those things feel. So that we can continue to do what the internet does well and skillfully mitigate the damage that the internet inevitably causes.